Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Desmond. Welcome to join us this morning. We will be sharing with you uh, the latest requirements on the business and investment migration for Australia. And also we will be looking into how Australia remains as an investment destination this morning. Just before we start, just a quick introduction. Global Migration and ANZ Migrate. We are the migration company that was established back in 15 and 16 years ago, and Global Migration being in Malaysia and ANZ Migrate being in Singapore. These are our milestones. Just to highlight a few of our milestones, we are seen as a premium migration advisory firm. Over the last 16 years, we have helped more than 12,000 families migrated successfully. And we maintain a very high successful records. Reason being able to do so is because we go through a thorough checks and documentation review before we take a client on board. And today we have several offices across Asia Pacific to support our clients. So we do have a support in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Australia, Hong Kong, and as well as Vietnam. And our success has also led us to won several international awards. So we basically helps clients with Australia and New Zealand. And we have also extended our supports to cover Portugal, United States, and Canada. Just a little bit about myself. And basically, I'm a licensed advisor under the jurisdiction of Australia and New Zealand. And prior to that, I was trained as a chartered accountant with the Pricewaterhouse. And that training has actually equipped me with, an important skill sets to be able to look into the client's application, especially, I mainly handles business investment clients. So that helps me to be able to deal with them, look at their financial statements, look at the numbers, and put all the rights documentation together to meet the immigration's requirements. Just to share with all of you, it is a privilege to also gain these international awards, being one of the top migration agency CEO back in 2019, and then we have moved up, become the top 25 last year. So this is the picture, and also the awards that I went over to Los Angeles. And James, who is my colleague, he is also a licensed immigration advisor. He will be the next speaker today, and he will share with you a little bit on more detail on the business and investment migration programs. He is also one of the top. He has gained top 25 global migration agency back in 2020. Importantly, he is also a trainer for the migration registered migration agent with the 17 years of experience. So these are our license registration with the Australia Immigration. Okay, very quickly, let's look into today's agenda. We would like to present the new framework about business and investment migration programs for Australia, and we will have also another speaker, Judith, to run you through, the various investment options, particularly the types of the businesses as well as the property aspect. And then we will have the Q&A at the end of the session. So please feel free to type your question in the chat box, and we will try to answer that towards the end of the session. Now, first thing first, I would like to basically share with everyone here on how the Australian government designed the programs, particularly the business and investment programs, to keep it as competitive and remain attractive Now, every one of you would know Australia has been the number one migration destination for many years. So it has outbeat all other migration countries such as United States, Canada, UK. And let's look at how these programs under the new requirements still remains attractive. Number one, the government is trying to keep their investment options, open up the investment options to cover a lot more variety, and we'll look into that. And in the past, some of you might have heard about the government bond, and this government bond attracts a very minimum returns of 0.1 before this is being abolished, and the government has taken off that and has turned that into a lot more investment options. And this is very important and has been very accepted, positively by, the migrants. Now, the government has also allowed a shorter conversion periods. So effectively, those who comes under the new requirements or who is applying now, they do have an option to gain their PR after 3 years. Yeah, but of course there are 2 stages. So everyone will be going through the first stage called 188 visa, which is a temporary residence. So what I'm trying to highlight over here is being a temporary residence visa holder. In the past, some of the programs might require to be able to convert into a PR right after 4 years, but now you could have the options to apply to become a PR right after 3rd year. Now, this visa has also extended to become 5 years instead of 4 years. And that says basically that that provides more times for preparation, especially for those who are not ready to move over to Australia yet. They do have an extra year before they need to move over to Australia. Yeah. Now, next, given the more investment options, and those investment options are seen as given a much higher returns. And we will also be covering that shortly. Now, importantly, as you know, currently the borders is under the restriction. So basically, if you are a PR, you are citizens, you're allowed to travel back to Australia. And just to highlight, this business and investment programs is among those few that are given the travel exemption. So that basically these programs has been given the privilege to travel. And in fact, these programs has given you more flexibility as compared to PR and TR, especially if you're looking at traveling back to your home country from Australia, and you are not required at this point of time to seek an approval or to seek an exemption to leave Australia, whereas PR and citizens would need to do so. Okay. And one last important aspect and how these programs are attractive, because during the TR, which is the temporary residence visa periods of the 5 years, you are not exposed to the worldwide tax income. So that says, you are not required to report any of your incomes overseas. Now, with these features, this is how the governments actually structure and design these programs to be very competitive and very attractive. Okay, let's look into what are these programs that we are talking about. Yeah, especially, when it comes to this business investment. So today we have 4 different types of the programs. We have 188 visa, and this is for people who is looking at or intended to set up a business in Australia. Yeah, and to do so, later James will walk you through on what are the requirements for you to be able to apply for this visa. So the idea about these programs is there will be a set of rules and regulations for a criteria for you to achieve. You apply for that visa. Right after the visa is approved, you have 5 years you have 5 years visa periods, and there will be a 2 years of requirements for you to run the business. So you could choose any point of times to set up a company in Australia, and the investment amount that used towards running the business would be ranging from 200,000 to 500,000, depending on where you're going to. For those who is not looking at running the business, you have this investor stream. And under this, what it is called 188B. So this 188B visa has now increased to become 2.5 million. But the good news about this is you are no longer, required to invest into the government bond that just give you 0.1% returns. You have much better options to choose. Now, 1AAC, this is a programs that require to invest 5 million. So basically, the investment options are the same between 1AAB and 1AAC. Okay, so B and C mainly are referring to the investment programs. Now, 1AAE, this is entrepreneur stream, pretty much similar to 188A. Yeah, and these programs has gone through a thorough changes right after 1st of July, and under the new legislation or the requirements, the rights has been given to the respective states government to offer a nomination for those who is applying under the 188E. Yeah, and we are still at the stage of waiting to see, what is the new criteria that is going to be announced by the respective states government. And we don't have at this stage, we don't have much to share yet on the 188E. Now let's look at the 1AA and those who go through the business innovation. So these are the typical types of the business that our clients has gone through. Clients are exploring the food and beverage, and pretty much, other than Victoria states, the rest of the states are pretty much quite lenient with the types of the business that you intend to set up. Yeah. So, but of course, I always remind the clients and suggest to them that, when you choose the types of the business, do also take into consideration whether or not you are hands-on. Yeah. So we have this support and on the business matching services, to look at, what are the types of the business that suit you well. And we will be covering that later by Judith. So we do also have the property developments, and these property developments I see that as remains as one of the very attractive model. A lot of the people likes to invest into asset-based options. Now, just to highlight it, under Australia programs, you're not allowed to buy over a completed unit and just keep it for rental. So under these circumstances, a property development is a good solution. So basically, you are allowed to buy land, then build a few houses on top, and basically you are seen as a property developer. We do also help clients with the farming and agricultural types of the business, winery, export as well. So we'll cover more on that later. Now, under the types of the investment, earlier we mentioned there are more types of investment available for you to decide. So typically, clients can choose to invest into the bond if you are looking at the low risk. Yeah, you can also even choose to invest directly into commercial property. Yeah, or REITs per se. Yeah, to certain extent. So this category of the investment, basically are looking at 3 to 10% of the targeted returns. So you also do have an options into the capital stable funds, which gives you 1.1 to 5% of targeted returns. And these programs, 1A, B, and C, do also require you to invest into the company listed under Australian Stock Exchange with the market share of below 500 millions. Yeah. So the fund manager that we work with, will walk you through on what are those options. And also take notes, there's also a venture capital portion where you're required to invest into this venture capital types of the company. So those are the private opportunity funds. Basically, those are the companies that is going for the pre-IPO. And for example, last year, we have seen the fund manager basically get the investor into those pharmaceutical products and pharmaceutical companies, and also, the technology companies. And those companies that has gone for IPO has managed to get a very extremely high returns. Yeah. So we are now looking at, a lot more attractive investment options under these new requirements. Okay, next, we will be looking at into more detail on what are the requirements for the business and investment programs. And I would like to hand over to James. James, over to you, please.
Thank you, Desmond, and good morning, everyone. So my name's James. Like Desmond mentioned, I'm also a registered migration agent.
James, are you able to move the screen?
Yep, not yet.
Not yet. So let me see if, let me try to give you the control. James, would you try, please?
Okay, yep, I've got it. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Okay, so as Desmond mentioned, there are various pathways for business and investment migration to Australia. So I'll talk a bit more in detail about these pathways. We have the 188 pathway, 188A pathway, which Desmond mentioned, which is a business innovation stream. Personally, I don't like the name business innovation because there's no aspects of innovation required for this. This is straightforward, a business owner visa. So you can do general types of business. You don't have to do anything innovative. And we have many clients that will go through and do a completely different business in Australia compared to what they do in their home country. And in fact, most clients do that. They'll go and do a restaurant or a shop or a retail business, which is often very different to the business they're doing back home in their home country. And that's acceptable for this. We have the entrepreneur stream, which Desmond mentioned. And as Desmond also mentioned, that's undergoing some changes. Previously, the applicants for this had to arrange a high level of venture capital funding, and that requirement's been removed. So it will make it easier from that aspect that our clients no longer have to arrange this high level of venture capital funding. But they do have to have a very innovative idea to commercialize a product or service in Australia, or to develop a business that is also innovative. So that's the key word with the entrepreneur stream. The activities you're doing in Australia need to be innovative. So for the 188A, the business innovation, which as I said, is really a business owner visa, the important point to understand with this is it's not just coming along and saying, I want to start a business in Australia. We're looking for clients, and this is the requirement, that the person has experience in owning and managing a business first before they apply for this visa to go to Australia. And the key requirements are that they need to demonstrate at least 2 full financial years of owning and managing a business first. And that business can be anywhere in the world. It can be Malaysia, can even be in Australia, could be anywhere, as long as they can show that they have been owning and managing it for at least 2 full financial years. The minimum ownership in the business needs to be at least 30% for a private company. If it's a publicly listed company, then it can be reduced down to 10%. The turnover requirement, and we're not concerned with profit here, we're concerned with the turnover of the business, has to be at least $750,000 equivalent, so equivalent to Australian dollars, 750,000 for at least 2 financial years. Now, that previously was 500,000. The government has increased this now as of 1st of July to 750K. Keep in mind, this program has been going since 2012. So that was quite a long period where we haven't seen an increase, but the government finally decided they need to increase requirements because there is strong demand for this program. And in fact, with this program, there are more people applying for this program than places normally available each year. So there is a small queue that's built up for this because it is a very high demand program. The asset position of the applicant for this pathway needs to be at least 1.25 million Australian dollars equivalent. So that can include assets from the business, can include personal assets as well. And there is an age limit for this, which is the main applicant needs to be under 55 years of age, but we can get a waiver for this. So I had a client, for example, last year that was 65 years old and got approval for this. So we can get a waiver for clients doing this, dependent upon their situation, of course. And to progress from this initial visa, which is the 188 temporary visa for Australia to the permanent resident stage, and this is after they've been running a business in Australia, the minimum stay requirement in Australia, so physical presence in Australia, is 12 months or 1 year. So that's the minimum time required in Australia to then migrate to the permanent resident stage. And in that time in Australia, they do need to be operating and managing a business in Australia. So that's part of that second stage to qualify for permanent residency. On the investment side, as Desmond quite clearly detailed, there are two investment pathways. We've got the lower one of 2.5 million and the higher one at 5 million. Now, there are catches with this lower amount, the 1888B investor 2.5 million. And the key limitation here is source of funds. So anyone wanting to invest the 2.5 million under the investor pathway needs to show that this 2.5 million has only come from earnings from their business ownership or investment ownership. And they also have to be actively involved in managing those businesses or investments. So that's the key limitation here. This money cannot come from inheritance, it can't come from gifts, it can't come from salary, it can't come from winning the lottery. It must come from investment activity or business activity only. That's the key limitation there. With the 5 million, the money can come from any legal source, and that can include gifted. We'll quite often have situations where we'll have a family doing this and parents or siblings may gift them additional money to make up that $5 million. So that's the key difference with them, but the actual investment that's done in Australia is now the same. So we invest in commercial funds for both of these investment amounts, whether it's the 2.5 billion or the 5 million. So a bit more detail about this. As I said, the 188B is 2.5 million. The 188C, significant investor visa, is 5 million. And the investment in Australia is now the same. As Desmond was explaining, previously with the 188B, it would go into a government bond. And we had a lot of issues with that. The government had a lot of concerns with that because it wasn't very productive and the interest rates were extremely low. So we're expecting very experienced investors to come to Australia under the 188B who have been investing their money thoughtfully and in good investment options. And then we're expecting them to put it into a government bond, which has almost no returns. And in fact, even late last year, we saw negative interest rates temporarily on this. So it really wasn't an effective investment option. So the government decided to change that, and they've changed as of the 1st of July to be a matching commercial investment, the same investment that's used for the 5 million significant investor visa. There is no age limit for the 188C. There is an age limit for the 188B of 55 years, but again, we can get a waiver for this. The other thing that I should also mention related to these is English language, because that comes up quite a bit. Now, with all of these pathways, with the exception of the entrepreneur, we can get a waiver for English language. And basically, there's a higher visa application charge, which can be used to offset the English language competency. But the English language requirement is actually very, very low. So if you want to do an English language test, for those familiar with the IELTS test, we're looking at 4.5, which is a 50% score on the English language test as an average score. If you don't want to do that or can't do that, that's fine. There'll be a slightly higher fee you need to pay to the government for the visa application charge. So that applies to all of these. The exception is the entrepreneur visa, which has a fixed English requirement that can't be waived. Now, the residency in Australia for the two investor pathways does vary. With a higher amount of money of 5 million, the time in Australia is greatly reduced. So the time required is roughly equivalent to 40 days per year over the period of the visa. So if the visa is for 3 years, which is the minimum time, then we're looking at 120 days stay in Australia. If you take it up to 5 years, which is the maximum for the initial visa, then you're looking at 200 days over that period. It's also possible, especially for the significant investor visa, to actually extend the time. And we do have some people that want to extend that time. So we can extend that 5 years up to 7 years or even 9 years for people that want to stay on the temporary visa for a longer period. And as Desmond mentioned, there are some special tax concessions that are available while you're on that temporary visa that won't be available when you're on the permanent residence, that relate to people that are living in Australia and have overseas income. So there's some special tax concessions available that can make that worthwhile. With the 188B investor visa, the time required in Australia is longer. That's the trade-off. Lower amount to be invested, but there is a longer stay required in Australia, and the minimum stay in Australia is 2 years for that visa. The commercial funds that are used for the investment, it's the same now for both the 188B and the 188C significant investor visa. So it's a commercial fund arrangement that's made up of 3 different funds. So 20% of the money needs to go into a venture capital fund. 30% goes into a share market fund, which is made up of shares on the Australian Stock Exchange in companies that have under 500 million market capitalization. So although we call it small caps, these can certainly be large companies. I mean, 500 million as the market capitalization for the company is the limit. And then the balancing fund of 50%. And typically with this balancing fund, our clients will have a fund that's set up specifically for them, and they can choose the structure of that 50% fund. And we'll have clients that may buy commercial properties, may buy stocks, bonds, and other assets, and have them held in that balancing fund. So that can be customized. Whereas the smaller funds tend to be fairly fixed, but the balancing fund can be customized to the client's own needs. And as I said, can include commercial real estate. In terms of the process, all of these steps are important, but one of the most critical steps, obviously, is step 1, which is making sure that people are eligible. And we are very serious about that. As Desmond mentioned, we've been doing this for a long time, 17 to 18 years. And one of the things that keeps us ahead and makes sure that we're doing our job well and professionally and really taking care of our clients and ensuring a high success rate is being open and honest with the chances for the application. So we'll look very carefully at your situation, look at your circumstances, and give you a confident response whether or not you'll be able to meet the requirements for this pathway. If you don't meet the requirements, there's no point going ahead and you're just going to be wasting your money. And that's very, very important. And it's something that I really am emphasizing because unfortunately, there are a lot of people in this industry that are not open and honest and will take clients on even though they know they're not going to meet the requirements. So you need to make sure you're dealing with a registered migration agent, a qualified and professional agent who is going to be open and honest with you about your chance of success. That's very, very important. So we do that initial review. If we're confident you'll go ahead, then we will agree to take you on board and take you through the process. The next step is submitting an expression of interest. Now, this is an electronic submission that goes to the Australian government to say, I would like to apply for this visa. And what actually happens then is that information will sit in the Australian immigration computer system. We will then approach one of the state or territory governments to get their consent, saying, yes, we agree this person is worthwhile and we'd like to have them running their investments or business in our state or territory. Once we get that approval, there's a trigger in the computer system that then triggers an invitation from that expression of interest, and we can then go ahead and make the visa application. Now, this process of getting the EOI and the state nomination typically takes about 1 to 2 months, but we can also get priority processing. We've got approvals from states within an hour before. So we can get these done very fast where required or if there are deadlines coming up. Once the invitation is issued, we have 60 days to make the visa application. So we'll prepare all the documents, get that visa application made. There will be checks required for medical conditions. So it's very important that if there are any medical concerns, you let us know up front. Minor medical conditions are not an issue. We have clients that get through successfully that have hepatitis B, have diabetes, have had cancer before. So let us know the situation. We can let you know whether or not this is a risk for the application. You don't need perfect health. What the government is concerned about is looking for conditions that might result in very, very high expected medical costs. We also need to get character checks done, which involve police checks. Again, you don't need a perfect record. Australia is very lenient when it comes to this, and we can even have people get through this where they've been imprisoned as long as it's less than 12 months. So it's the degree and severity of the criminal history that is a concern there. Going through all of that, we will then wait for the processing. The processing periods do vary. So the moment the government is giving priority to people from Hong Kong, and that's from a humanitarian concern. So anyone applying from Hong Kong is getting priority processing for any of the 188 visa streams. Regardless of the stream they're doing, they will get priority processing. Second will be people doing their significant investor visa. They will get priority processing. And I've had a case earlier this year that only took 3 months. So 3 months from submission to grant of the visa. And then after that, we're looking at all of the other subclasses, all the other streams of the business investment program. Unfortunately, because of the high number of people applying, the other streams will take longer to process, and we are seeing delays of around 2 or more years for those. So it's very important to get into that queue earlier, because the processing time, unfortunately, is longer for these. And that's just a result of the high numbers of people that continue to apply for these streams. So what actually happens with the government is when they have high numbers applying than they can cater for, they don't drop people off and cancel their visa, they put them into a queue. And that just means that the processing is a little bit longer, unfortunately, but the earlier you get in, the earlier you get out of the queue. Now, one of the questions that's coming up at the moment because of the pandemic period is who can enter Australia. Now, the Australian government, being an island and having a very good track record in terms of the COVID-19 management, certainly not perfect, but they've had a good record so far. They have put limitations in around who is allowed to enter Australia, and they've managed the borders very tightly. So currently, people that are Australian citizens or permanent residents can travel to Australia, and they have made other exceptions available. That includes people that are working in critical skill sectors, people that are family members of Australian citizens or residents. But of interest here is they have also allowed people that hold a 188 business visa to travel to Australia. So if you hold the 188 business visa, you are able to go through the border exemptions and get the right to travel to Australia during this pandemic period. Hopefully these restrictions will cease, hopefully early or mid next year. But until then, it's good to know that people holding the 188 visa can actually enter Australia. Okay, thank you, Desmond.
Thanks, James. And let's move on to to Judith. Judith, please.
Hi, welcome everyone. We're just going to go through Australia as an investment destination, because obviously we're talking about investment visas, and oops, what happened there? Can I play it?
Sure, Judith, I'm just passing over to you.
Okay, that's great. Okay, so Australia as an investment destination. Let me try and click the next screen. Okay. So a little bit from us, from International Property Settlements. We've been in the business of marketing Australian property for the past 11 years, and Nick, our team, and I have experience in all the cities. So we often get asked this in Sydney, in Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, and in Queensland as well. So, and we've been dealing with a lot of property developers, such as Brady, Niche Living, Frasers. We deal a lot with them, Mirvac, Metricon, Finbar as well in Perth, and Lendlease. A little bit about myself. I'm a chartered accountant by profession, a bit like Desmond. Started my career in KPMG, and we've been doing this business for 11 years, so for Australian property. A little bit about Australia. Actually, the economy is continuing to grow even during this time, which is something very, very positive. Australia has handled COVID very positively. Their output by state is New South Wales 32%, Victoria 24%, WA 16%. We will focus a little bit more on WA in this particular presentation in terms of the property, in terms of the investments as well, but we do have a property in and investment suggestions of matching in different states. Australia continues to have a good exports to China, to Japan, the EU, Korea, US, and India. The average price of residential dwellings is 729,000. This is important when we're considering the type of investment to invest in terms of affordability for our secondary sale, but also in terms of yield for the renters that will rent from us. Household wealth is at 806% of the share of income. And in terms of exports, Australia exports a lot of resources, services, rural products as well, and manufacturing products. This is important when we're choosing the type of investments for businesses. In terms of economic forecast, the latest Deloitte Access Economics took stock of the Australian economy, and it's actually quite interesting to see that there is still an expected growth in 2021 in different states. The expected growth is at different percentages, but it's from 3%, so in most states, and so that is also an interesting outlook. There's economic growth as well in terms of projected economic growth of above 4%, and these are some of the industry performance as well. Again, this is important when looking at the sort of general economic stimuli of Australia in terms of the investments, in terms of business investments and also property investments, the yield or the area where people will rent from us, and in terms of commercial properties as well, the types of services. So it's quite interesting actually that transportation and storage, of course, logistics is the new area where a lot of people are looking at. So storage is important. These are some of the commercial. So in terms of warehouses and all that, these type of investments are in vogue and doing very well. Accommodation and food services as well. That is some of the areas where the new type of food services, such as the takeaways, these are actually growing businesses. And of course, farming and fishing has always been there. There's some opportunities in education as well. Interest rates, interestingly, again enough, is it has been very low, and it will remain low as before there is increase in wages. So what the Australian government has a very tight fiscal policy, and they are tracking the inflation and the increases in wages very, very carefully to make sure that there is an increase in wage before the interest rates are increased, and that will take a while. So we expect interest rates to be low and continue to be low. At the moment, the cash rate is at its lowest ever. Some of the example businesses that we have, we actually at International Property Settlements also have been doing a business matching service for our clients, particularly in the for the immigration or the investment visas. And these are some of the examples. These are not the only examples that we have, but these are some that are available at the moment. And we always advise our clients to, actually we don't have to advise our clients, a lot of our clients come and tell us, we're doing this sort of business and we want to find a business matching that we know that we are able to already have an existing market, whether in Malaysia, in Asia, or a lot in China, where there's a lot of trading happening still within Australia and China. So one of these businesses are woolen fashion garments. We work with several providers. In Perth, we work with Herman Steger of Steger Consulting, and he provides us some of these businesses, and we look again at matching very carefully. So this is one of the examples of Herman's recommendations, and this is an Australian-made woolen fashion garments business, and it has branches in both Perth and in Melbourne, so it suits both areas of the investment migration. And yeah, so it's actually an established business, and it is a manufacturer of wool fashion garments. Another example is we get a lot of questions in farming. So this one is in Perth, and it is a secure ownership of cattle and land. And there's also in this business a potential for government subsidies. There are cafe franchises as well in all the states. So this one is in Perth, it is located in a modern shopping center, and this is an example of a franchise business. Cafes and the coffee culture is very popular in Australia, in Perth, Melbourne, Sydney, and so margins of coffees are high, and this in terms of particularly a takeaway coffee business is a fairly lucrative business. There's also, we get a lot of inquiries on trading and building materials import. Australia at the moment is having a little bit of a building boom, and there's actually a lack of supply of materials in certain construction sectors, and so yes, they do need building material. So for example, air conditionings and wooden flooring, those are some of the things that there are opportunities in as well. Safety equipment and sales services, this is another opportunity. This particular business already has a large database of customers who require such equipment, and these are some of the businesses that if our clients are looking for, we can also look at. There's also food delivery business. This one is operating in Melbourne and also in Queensland. And this company delivers food such as duck and chicken to restaurants. This is also an available business. Of course, logistics is also a good business at the moment. There's also an entertainment business that's looking for investment. And they have locations in both Queensland and Victoria, and they actually partner with brands such as Disney to do trick eye museums and you know, where entertainment for people that, you know, look like you're standing on King Kong. That's quite an interesting business too. So we just wanted to show these examples of businesses, suggestions and examples that you can invest in. As Desmond said, these businesses are lucrative and they provide a better opportunity for I suppose us in Asia to expand as well into Australia. So which is, I suppose, the purpose of the investment, but they are positive investments, particularly in areas that you as a significant investor may prefer. There's also export business. We actually have done some export business before in sea cucumber. This one is in Jarrah honey and lobster, and also in meat. And this is an ownership of a stock and commercial warehouse as well. So there's also something close to my heart, which is a property service business, property management business. These businesses, as you know, the rental industry in Australia is a lucrative one, and it is a constant churning one. In fact, it's so constant churning that the rental tenancies are actually assets that the company holds. So these are some other qualifying investments that you can as well invest in. I'm going to move now to talk a little bit about property. Australia as well has a, even during this time, a projected growth in property values. This is an actual growth in March 2021. And you can see that property prices in general grew in these percentages. There is also, over the past 25 years, Australia has a very stable growth in property, and in these different states, there are these number of growths, which is Sydney tops it at some 7%, Adelaide as well, in the national as well, 6.8%, and also Melbourne as well at 8.1%. So there has been a very, very stable growth in the Australian property prices as well. So Perth as an property investment destination is actually has been in focus over the past 1 year. And it is actually forecasted that Perth property prices will surge by some 12% this year and over the next few years. And some of the reasons why is because the property prices haven't increased a while. It's on the opposite side of the property clock. There are some stamp duty stimuli as well. And this will last only until it is available for foreigners. This will actually last only until the end of October. So if you're looking at a property in Perth, it might be worthwhile to have a look at it now, because there are, particularly for apartments, stamp duty discounts, rebates until the end of October. And this will actually save you up to 50,000 Australian dollars in stamp duty, and that's a lot. So that's 150,000 ringgit. Perth has a lack of supply in terms of rental property, and this particular article states that 2 beds, 1 toilet, and 800 inquiries. We have questions like we have actually read stories about single moms who can't get a place to rent, or people that have pets who can't find a place to rent, and it's because it's actually an owner's market at the moment where everyone is just assessing each and every tenant and choosing their best. So there is a lack of a supply of rental properties and a whole lot of people that want to rent. This is as well pushing yields up. And it is actually a very good time to look at general investment or rental properties in Perth, because yields are at the moment also being pushed up. So there are also property prices that is this article on set to soar 15% this year. And many articles, actually just Google Western Australia property prices or Western Australia rentals, and you'll find actually good problems in terms of rentals having a lack of supply, and also prices being pushed up. So Perth rental prices at the highest in 6 years as vacancy rates continue to fall as well. We assist our clients from end to end, including from spotting your ideal property according to your list of criteria, your budget, your intention of owning the property. We have in our stock list probably more than 500 properties, including commercial. As we said, warehouses are something that has been in vogue lately a lot. And also, we also then assist you in your loan, and also then in sort of the management side of it, in terms of managing your rental property and also your future sale. So these are some of the solutions that we have in terms of loans. We work with a whole host of mortgage brokers here in Asia, and we also work with some of the local banks. And this particular table is quite an attractive mortgage option that we have at the moment. The interest rate is low at 3.88%, and also the list of documents required is not so onerous. These are some of the properties. We are focusing a little bit more on Perth in this presentation, but of course we have properties in Sydney, in Melbourne, and in Queensland as well, from Gold Coast, and also in the other states actually. So this particular one is a apartment project. It is a luxury apartment project in South Perth. It's called Riviere, and it hasn't been built yet, so it's still entitled to stamp duty concessions, and it's right on the foreshore of South Perth. Almost all the units have that are facing the foreshore have views. This one is in Subiaco. We get asked a lot about Netland, Subiaco, and Claremont because that is the luxury locations in Perth. This one is very reasonably priced. It's in the heart of Subiaco, walking to the train station. And for the next month, it's also available for stamp duty rebates as well. And actually the stamp duty rebates run out in October, so it is a really good time. This one is completed, and it is, we actually promoted this one well because it is from 300,000, you can get a 1+1 bedroom apartment. It's really suitable for students if you have a kid studying in Perth already, or intend to have your children studying in Perth. This is a really good one. By the way, this was actually a structured investment for one of our Malaysians who wanted to invest for purposes of a visa. He bought this piece of land and built 16 apartments, and it has sold very well actually. So this one is in Dalkeith. This is also a beautiful property, and it's only from 1.4 million Aussie dollars for a luxury property in Dalkeith, which is the equivalent of a Bukit Tungku area or Damansara Heights area in KL. So actually, it's Perth. Actually, there's a lot of high net worth people that are there and moving to Perth, particularly with these investment visas. So we actually see that luxury property or luxury locations will grow over the next 2 to 3 years. This particular one is in Como. It has river views and their townhouses. Again, another really nice development. We also do many houses in areas that you can actually request for, because we will source you a piece of land and build. We get asked this a lot, a one-story house on top, and these are some of the ones that are applicable. And they range from around 400,000 Aussie dollars for the land. You enter into 2 contracts for the land, and then we assist you to structure or to plan a house on top of it, and they are fairly high yield in some locations, and they have a very good chance of capital appreciation. So these are areas which we assist our clients in, and so far actually most of our clients that have invested in house and land in areas which we have sort of consulted in have been very happy actually. So that is the end of my presentation. That's my contact number. You can WhatsApp me or email me. And it's hard to cover everything we know in 15 minutes. So you can ask lots of questions, and certainly contact me and we'll answer the rest of your questions too.
Judy, thank you so much for this interesting sharing. And I think that actually brings us to the next session, which is the Q&A. So I'm sure there are a lot of questions that's coming towards, trying to get clarified from the audience. And let's look at some of those questions. Audrey, would you please?
Sure. Thank you, Desmond. Thanks once again, Judith and James as well. It has been a real informative, concise presentation. That's really good. So there's a lot of questions. I'm going to go through a couple of them at the same time. So basically, everything that has been shared, we can clearly see that the economic situation is stable in Australia, and how wisely Australia has planned their migration program to continue to make Australia the #1 destination for world's high net worth individuals. So following that, Desmond, can you share what are your thoughts and how well received is the new 188B visa that now requires a higher amount of investment of 2.5 million?
Okay. Well, pertaining to this visa 188B, and every one of us know the government's increased from 1.5 to 2.5 million. So my personal point of view is I think this is a good change. So basically I look at, beyond what is, I look at, things that is beyond, the additional 1 million of the investment. More importantly is the options of the investment that you now have. You didn't have that previously. Yeah, but now basically from what we have gathered from the clients, and they actually like this idea. They feel like they have more options and more opportunities available on the investment, from the amount that they are investing into Australia. And I think this is a good change personally.
Okay. James, may I ask you, one of the most common question, or rather a misconception, is Australia borders are closed, which means the clients think that they cannot apply for a visa or get a visa right now. Is this true?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, so there are some countries, for example, we do Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand has put a hold on most applications from offshore and are not granting applications to people that are outside of New Zealand. Australia is the opposite. So Australia has continued the program. And in fact, what's interesting is during the pandemic period, the government actually doubled the number of places available for the business investment scheme. So they're actually increasing the number of applicants coming through rather than going the other direction and slowing it down. So they're doing that. They are working on increasing or improving the processing times as well. But definitely, no, they're full steam ahead. And in fact, as I said, they've doubled the number of places last year and this year that are available for the business investment program.
Right. And if you can add on to that, James, once they get the visa, they'll also be able to travel at the current point of time?
There are some limitations with leaving Australia, mainly that restricts Australian citizens and permanent residents. The concern of the government is that because there's limits with the number of people coming into the country, they don't want to, they want to restrict people going outside of Australia unless it's very necessary to do so. And so they have put restrictions around Australian permanent residents and citizens leaving the country. However, temporary residents are not restricted. So 188s, visa holders can enter Australia and they can leave Australia. There are no restrictions around that.
Right, fantastic. That's good. That's really good to know. Okay, thanks, James. Judith, there were a lot of nice, interesting business ideas that you've shared. So do you mind sharing with us any case where you've helped a business migrant who's gotten their visa and how your firm has helped to find a business idea and set up this business for them in Australia?
Yes, sure. We've actually done quite a few in terms of property because property is our forte. And what we would do is assist them to find a piece of land and build, whether it's 4 townhouses or 16 apartments like that one you saw. And we would also assist with the end sale. So we would do a business plan. All of these businesses come with a business plan. And we would be able to assess, in general, particularly for property, the valuation of the original land, valuation of the end units, and also then the projected profitability. So those are some of the examples. And in terms of businesses that are non-property related, we've actually done some interesting ones, such as the sea cucumber. That was quite an interesting one. So we have done some business mapping during the course of our time, and it is quite interesting to also match different businesses because it feels actually quite satisfying because we're also expanding Australia's market to the rest of the world.
Sure. Thanks, Judith. Thanks. So basically, from the outlook, we can see that WA's economy has generally recovered from the initial COVID-19 with strong support from the mining industry and all, right? Of course, there are some travel restrictions in place right now. This is basically to prevent the virus from spreading into the community. So this is a positive news for investors as well. So Desmond, do you mind sharing on how the migration program in Perth is targeting the high net worth and how we can help? How can you help?
Sure. This is a good question. Why Perth? I guess, if we have looked at the past few years, Perth has becoming so popular. In fact, every year the quota will use up so quickly. Now, I think first thing first, for those who is above 55 years old, Perth is one of the states that are basically welcoming those who is above 55 years old. Like what Jane had mentioned earlier, there is an age restriction when it comes to 188A and 188B visa, whereas 188C doesn't have that age limit. So Perth has been quite welcoming on those who is above 55. Now, secondly, Perth, the options available, I guess, for migrants to look into the possibility on where they would want to settle down, they will also be looking at, the stability and the growth of the states. And all the numbers shows the Perth are going through or is undergoing, a growth, a significant growth at the moment. And if you look at the government policy from the Western Australia States government, the policy and the requirements to get a nomination is very reasonable. They keep and maintain pretty much the same requirement as what is being set by the federal government. Let me give you an example. For example, if you're exploring New South Wales to go to New South Wales, or you're exploring to go to Victoria, for example, you're required to invest, for example, 500,000 if you're going to New South Wales, or 400,000 if you're going to Victoria. But if you're exploring Western Australia, for example, there isn't a minimum requirements set under the new changes from 1st of July. So that has basically lowered down, these requirements has lowered down the entry requirements to most of the migrants. And yeah, so these are, a few attractive the situation that motivates someone from choosing Western Australia.
Right. Thank you, Desmond. Judith, do you mind sharing what are the expected returns on the business investments that you've spoken about?
So each of these suggested businesses come with a business plan. So the ones that we tend to pick have at least a 5% return. And we obviously pick businesses where there is also a historical profitability. So it depends on the amount of investment, but we do actually come up with quite a clear sort of PE ratio and ROI for each of the businesses. But yes, they would come with at least a 5% projected return.
5%, that's great. Thank you, Judith. James, this question, if you could help out with this question, please. So there are two types of investment visa. Why would one invest on the 5 million when they can actually invest on the 2.5 million, which actually has the same investment framework?
Yeah, the key difference is going to be that with the 2.5 million, it's a lot more complicated in terms of proving the source of funds, and they can only come from specific sources. Whereas with the 5 million, it can come from any legal source. Salary, inheritance, lottery, any of these are acceptable. But with the 2.5 million, the money can only come from your business that you've owned and managed or investments that you've owned and managed. And it's not just you've got investments, you have to show that you've been managing those investments.
Okay, thank you, James. All right, let's look at the next question. Judith, this is for you. Do I have to manage the business myself?
Yeah, so that's the great thing. In some cases, you can invest sort of your shares in a business from, I think Desmond was explaining, up to 30% shares in the business. A lot of our clients prefer to invest more than 50% or about 50%. So they have a co-ownership with the existing business owner. They do have to show that they are involved in the business. According to Desmond and James, we get that a lot. So there needs to be a certain involvement in the business, and so a review of reporting and all that comes in, and that's something that is arranged with the partner. But yes, they don't have to own the whole business, so it can be sort of invest in shares, or I suppose a partnership, but not under a partnership structure. It still needs to be in a proprietary limited structure and have the business managed by the partner, but they would need to be significantly involved, which I suppose is the good thing anyway. We should be significantly involved in the businesses that we manage or that we invest in, and it's something that it's a review and reporting function as well.
Okay, thanks for that, Judith. All right, next question. So Desmond, this will be for you. The business visa 188A requires the applicant to actually run a business in Australia, right? So, however, as you know, globally, many have become more risk adverse in making business decisions at this point of time. So what more setting a new business? So can you advise for those who have this concern, is there a time limit by when the business should be set up, or is there any flexibility around this?
Sure. I think this is a good question, especially given the current pandemic situation and a lot of uncertainty. And I have been asked over and over again, if they were to apply for that visa, what is the timeline like? Now, generally it takes around at least 18 months or 20 months. But if we go by strictly the official processing time, it is much longer than that. So I would say that, from the preparations until the time you get the visa, that would take about 2 years. And you are then given another 5 years right after that, whereby you need to run the business for 2 years out of the 5 years. So from the preparation times, I mean, when you started this application, and before you need to go over to start the business, you do have 5 years in total before moving over. But in the interim periods, your children's, or family already have the visa right after 2 years to live in Australia. So that says you are in no hurry to kickstart the business right after the visa approved. You do have relatively quite, a long time to decide and to explore what business to get yourself into. But of course, we are expecting that this is going to be a long handheld process, from us to guide you through and to match you into the right business. Yeah, that is going to be comfortable for you. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Desmond. Judith, I think this is a property related question. So are we able to get a loan right now in Australia, and how can you help?
So yes, I think there was a short time in 2017 where there were a little loan options available, but we still had options during those time. Currently, there are many loan options available, and there are options from Singapore, such as UOB and OCBC Singapore. There are options from Malaysia. Maybank is really doing a really good job for a lot of our clients, and also there are mortgage brokers who deal with lenders in Australia. So what we actually do is assist our clients to submit in, to several banks and mortgage brokers, and we can get you the best deal in terms of the margin of finance that you want, and also the interest rate, and we can evaluate that as well for you. So yes, it is possible. That's something we do a lot to assist our clients to get a loan. And in general, for the margin of finance is about 70%, and the interest rates at the moment are from 3.88, which is very attractive.
Right, thank you, Jim. Thanks, Judith. Desmond, next question is for you. When do I need to invest the money, and what is the duration, and how can my assets help towards the application?
Okay, so I guess this question is referring to the 188B or 188C. Yeah, when to invest. Because we mentioned about the business options earlier, the business innovation, you generally, under that 188A, you need to invest right after, only when you started the business, and you do have from the submission times under the approval, then given another 5 years. So you do have, to run the business for 2 years. So you have, including the processing time, you have 5 years in total before you need to invest. Now, as for the 188B and the 188C, so you are investing towards the end of the visa approval. So basically what happens is, towards the end, right before the immigration is ready to issue the approval of the visa, they will invite you to invest, to start with the investment. So on the 2.5 million or the 5 million respectively. So you are given 70 days, but given the current situation, the immigrations are allowing a lot more times, for clients to complete. Now, 188B in general takes about 20 months. So you do have about 2 years from the applications to invest. 188C, on the other hand, is much faster, depending on how urgent you want the visa to be granted. Like what James had mentioned earlier, he had a client that has taken just 3 months to get an approval. I also did another one, which was in the hurry. Client was in the hurry to get the daughter who is on the final year to go over to Australia to complete her final exam. And I have done that almost slightly below 3 months. So I would say about 3 months, because it was in fact crossing over, the Christmas time in December, and I got the approval. I submit the visa back in December over the Christmas, and I got the approval around March. So if you're exploring the 5 million options, which is the 188C, you could relatively, I would say, you need to invest in about 3 months' times or up to 1 year, depending on how fast you want us to push through your application. Thank you.
Right, so fantastic. So 188C, which is the 5 million, seems to be the fastest way to get into Australia right now.
Indeed, yeah.
Okay, great. There's another question. Can we invest in a property development as part of the PR investment? So that's a migration question, I believe.
For me, Audrey?
Yes, for you.
Okay, sure. Yes, well, I mean, under property development, it depends on where you're going to and where you get the nomination. It is difficult if you are approaching Victoria State's government to accept these property developments unless you're building, the whole blocks of condo, apartments with some, basically massive projects, then that will be considered. For if you're exploring this under Queensland, the Queensland government would like to see you have some existing experience in property developments. But if you are looking at basically Western Australia, South Australia, or New South Wales, and these 3 states doesn't generally ask for pre-existing experience. So you can get into these property developments easily if you are looking at going to the rest of the 3 states. So for Queensland, we do have clients going through Queensland as well. When we talk about related experience, you might be involved in, supplying the building materials. You might be involved in, in some sort of renovation or construction work, and you may not necessarily be a property developer as yet. And it is the relevant experience that is required for Queensland. Thank you.
Can I just add something to that? I think it's very important for people to be aware. Although obviously a lot of people are interested in residential property development, it's very, very popular. The governments in Australia aren't keen on that as a migration pathway. And over time, they are putting in some restrictions, as Desmond mentioned, with Queensland as an example. Victoria's also put restrictions in place as well. So the point I want to get across is if you want to do property development as your business, do it now. Because over time, there will be more and more restrictions put in by the government because they prefer people do more active businesses. So we can do the property development businesses now, but there will be more restrictions added in time as time goes on. So if you're looking at doing property development as a business, always better to do it as early as possible.
We actually have done many in Australia, in Western Australia, and it is a very popular option. It's I think a lot of Asians consider it quite a safe option to evaluate because of the valuations, clear valuations of property prices, land, and the eventual sale. So yeah, if you want to look at it as soon as possible, we actually have several. It's a menu actually of property developments that may appeal to you.
Thanks for that, Judith, Desmond, and James. All right, Judith, this is another property question. What about stamp duties when I purchase a property in Australia? Could you mind sharing what this?
Yeah, so we get asked this question a lot. There are stamp duties, and if you are not a PR and a foreigner, there are different stamp duties in different states, and they range from 7%. The stamp duties, if you're buying a house and land, is only on the land. So there are ways, particularly if you're buying a land and a house, to save on this stamp duty. But I always advise our clients not to worry too much about the stamp duty, because as we can see, the property prices are increasing anyway. So as you can see in my earlier chart, property prices, if chosen a good property, increase by on average around 6% per year anyway. So within 1 year or 1.5 years, that kind of proportion of stamp duty would be more or less covered. So we always advise our client not to look so much at the stamp duty. It is an implementation by the government, obviously, to because they know that a lot of overseas investors are interested in Australia. But it also covers things like, the general roads and infrastructure in these areas and all that, we as foreigners have not worked in Australia and sort of paid tax and invested in. And so it kind of, overall covers all the general things that particular property has benefited from, and you as an investor benefit from over the long run anyway.
Thanks, Judith. Thanks for that. Okay, we have one last question left for the day. And James, could you please help with this, which is like, can you guarantee if I will get the visa?
Short answer is no, but let me qualify that. And the reason why the answer is no, Desmond and myself are licensed with the Australian government. And part of that involves very strict code of conduct and what we can and can't say. And we are not the government, although we're licensed with the government. So we can't speak on behalf of the government, and we're legally not allowed to guarantee a visa. That's the short answer. What we can do, and we've got a very strong history to back this up, is carefully assess the case, be very sure whether or not the client can meet all the requirements. Because if a client meets all the requirements and the right evidence is provided that the client meets all of the requirements, the visa will be granted. So there is no ambiguity there. There is no discretionary decision-making. If a client meets all the requirements, they will be granted the visa. There's no picking and choosing by the government. So we can be very confident, and we will do all the checks, and we've got a very strong success record behind us that gives confidence to our clients. But the short answer is no, we can't guarantee it, but we can say to a client as much as possible whether or not they will get the visa.
Fantastic. Thank you, James. There's actually one last question that came in. I think is important. This is for Judith. There's a client asking, maintaining a house in Perth. It's about maintaining a house in Perth. What is the yearly tax to maintain for the houses, if there's a tax, and what is the utility charges monthly?
So this is sort of an accounting question, and it depends on the type of investment, also whether the client takes a loan. And so what we can do is, okay, if we take a loan, we can deduct interest, and we can also deduct this thing called depreciation, which is a non-cash item. And so at the end of the day, there's a tax loss, and we can carry that forward. It's called negative gearing. And so taxation on rental income, generally, if we take a loan, then we don't have to pay that, at least for the first 10 years or several years, depending on, again, the margin of finance. So this is sort of consultative, and we have to do a calculation. So what is the yearly tax to maintain the houses? Okay, so in general, other than stamp duty and taxes on rental, which it can be negative geared, there is maintenance, annual maintenance, and that would be our general council rates, which again range, and it depends on whether it's a house or an apartment, and depending on the location, but I would say it's about 1,000 a year. And then so there's a council rates, water rates, which is around less than 1,000 a year, and also property, what we call a property management or apartment management fee. Over there, it's called body corporate. So again, this is consultative, and it depends on the type of property. In general, it is not so scary, and you still should get a positive return at the end of the year, of that financial year.
Thank you. So I'm sure that answers the question. So we've come to the end of the session. There is the contact details on the screen right now. That has been there. For those who want to know more about the property aspect or the business aspect or migration, please contact us. For migration, of course, contact GMS, our office. Anything to do with the business opportunities or property, please contact IPS. Okay, we're happy to have a one-to-one session so that we can basically assess your eligibility and also provide you the best advice according to your situation. All right. So that's it. So thank you, Desmond, James, and Judith. If there's anything, is there any last words from y'all before we end the session? Desmond?
Sure. Well, I think the needs of residency, given the borders control and restrictions, has becoming very different now. And we see the momentum, things that clients take into consideration, indeed is very different. My personal opinion is Australia still is going to remain as one of the very attractive migration destination, whether it is for your children's education or for your retirements or for your needs, and looking at Australia as your second homes. So do contact us if you have any question and you're not sure on what is the right pathway for you to gain the residency. Yeah, and importantly, everyone, please stay safe. Yeah, thank you.
James, any last words from you?
There's so much I could say, but I am Australian. I think Australia is one of the best countries in the world. It's not perfect, nowhere is, but I think it's a country that's really a good place to live, good quality of life. It's always shown up in surveys as having a good quality of life. And I think one of the signs of that is you will see Australians like myself, we'll go overseas and we'll work for a while, but we always go back. Even if we have an extended stay overseas, we don't become, a Malaysian citizen. We keep our Australian citizenship and we go back. Whereas the reverse, you'll see a lot of Malaysians move permanently to Australia. They don't just go there for a short while and come back. So I think that's telling in itself that Australia is one of the best countries to live in. I just want to add in just a little extra bonus we didn't mention, that if you do get your Australian citizenship down the track, you can also live in New Zealand as well. So you actually have two countries available to you. You can live and work in New Zealand by virtue of the fact that, actually, not even just citizenship, your permanent residency in Australia. So you get your permanent residence in Australia. You can also live and work, study in New Zealand equally, as well as Australia. So you actually have two countries open to you, two fantastic countries that have some of the best quality lifestyles in the world.
Thank you, James. Last but not least, Judith, we can do the grand closure.
Thank you. So I agree with James that Australia is one of the best countries in the world to live in. That's a personal decision as well, and I will enjoy living in Australia someday too. I think Australia actually is also a really good country to invest in. I really think that the political stability, the fiscal policies, and even the property in terms of the valuation systems, it's safe. There's not a huge capital appreciation like I think some expect in Asia, but it is certainly a stable and fairly predictable market to invest in. And we actually have seen many of our clients personally, and also many of our clients benefit from such a stable country and also economic environment.
Thank you. Okay, wonderful. Thanks, everyone. We had a very good session today. So we look forward to hear from you and assist you further. Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.